6 today. And we're going to be up at verse 7. So last week, just kind of set things up here a little bit. This isn't a really great setup for our text for today, by the way. We had last week in worship, you talked about Jesus calming the storm. Okay, and Jesus continues to heal, and he continues to teach throughout the rest of chapter 5. And then the top of chapter 6, something happens. Jesus is actually rejected in his own hometown. All right, so the message and the mission that Jesus brings to this world is actually rejected. All right, not a good setup, like I said. Because now Jesus is going to send out his 12 disciples that he has called into the world to spread that mission and message of love to other people. The same one that was just rejected in his hometown. And he's going to send 12 disciples. Now we've only seen these guys a few times on our journey so far. Okay, throughout the Gospel of Mark. Several weeks ago, we saw these disciples. They didn't get Jesus' message when it came to parables. Jesus was teaching in parables, and they were like, "Can you explain that to us? We don't really know what that means." And Jesus had to explain it to them, and he had to get on them a little bit and say, "Look, if you don't understand this, how are you going to understand anything else that's about to happen?" Right? At the end of chapter 4, from last week with the calming of the storm, we saw that he charged them with being fearful, with lacking faith as he calmed the storm. And then later in chapter 5, up at the top, Jesus is walking around. Jesus realized that once that the healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robes?" And his disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd. How can you ask who touched me?" That's kind of brave, right? So here they are. They're actually wondering, why are you even asking something like that? So here we have a message that has been rejected in his hometown, and we have these 12 that are about to go out to the world in today's text. Like I said, it's looking up for it for Team Jesus right now. All right? So he's going to take this group, and he's going to send them out. And he's going to send them out, and he's going to tell them, "I need you to preach. I need you to teach. I need you to heal. I need you to care for other people." Now, if you are putting together an outreach ministry team, these are probably not your top prospects. Okay? These are young boys. They're teenagers, first of all. Most of them are fishermen. So, no experience in doing this. No theology degree. No degree at all. Because they're fishermen, we know they only went so far in their studies as young Jewish boys. They didn't continue on. They didn't make the cut. All right, so they had to take up fishing. All right. One of them, Matthew, is a tax collector for the Romans. He was with the other guys for a while. Many of them, Scripture tells us, have quick tempers. One was a revolutionary. One of them was a traitor and not a true believer at all. Sounds like a great team, doesn't it? All of them are different soil, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, with the seed falling on the different types of soils. And at this moment, it would be safe to say it might not be looking so good for Jesus' ministry as he sends them out. I mean, these guys even lacked, they didn't even have a basic spiritual understanding at this point. They didn't have influence over anybody. And here's the deal. In spite of all of that, in spite of their weaknesses, in spite of their shortcomings, in spite of their lack of experience, in spite of everything, Jesus still chooses them to go out into the world and turn it upside down. Now come on. If Jesus can use these disciples, Jesus can use us. If Jesus can use them, He can use you. Rich, poor, middle class, degree, no degree. Have questions about the faith, pretty solid in my faith. Whatever it is, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, it doesn't matter. If Jesus can use them, He can use anybody. He can use you. And so up until this point, Jesus had been preparing them. He had been teaching them. He had been training them. They didn't know it, but that's what He was doing. Let's go to our text. Verse 7. He called His 12 disciples together and began sending them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits. He told them, take nothing for their journey except a walking stick. No food, no traveler's bag, no money. Yikes. I mean, I even pack when I go to Africa. Why did he do that? Why do you think He did that? I think it's because Jesus is showing them He's the only thing that they need in this. You know, we think, oh, we got to have all this stuff in order to do this, right? Church is getting this habit too. Oh, we got to have this stellar programming. We have to have this. We have to have that. We have to have smoke. We have to have the big light system. We have to have big auditoriums. People, oh, I have to have experience. I don't know the Bible very well. I need this. I need that. I need money. I need time. And Jesus says, relax. I'm all you need. You got this. That's what He was telling His disciples. My provision is all that you need. And I got you. And Jesus sends them out, it says 2 by 2. I love that part. 2 by 2. He sends them out in partners. Jesus knows we need each other in this mission that Jesus calls us to do. We need each other. Ministry requires accompaniment. I can't do this alone. I need you. Deacon Lynette can't do what she's been called to do without you. Perfect example, these last 2 weeks with me being gone to Iowa to see my wife Stacy's family. Right? 2 of our members have passed away. And from a distance, I saw our church community coming together, trying to help in any way that they possibly could. I saw band members emailing each other, trying to get together for a practice for Saturday's a funeral. I saw Pastor Beth Marie stepping in to be with family while both Deacon Lynette and I were gone. When Deacon Lynette got back, she was meeting with family. I was on the phone trying to get things situated. But everybody came together because ministry is about accompaniment. We can't do this by ourselves. Ministry is not a Lone Ranger sport. Discipleship is not a Lone Ranger sport. We were made to be together, and time and time and time again, we will see this. The Apostle Paul walks with Timothy. And Timothy is Paul's disciple. I mean, we see this time and time again. This stuff that we are called to do is relational stuff. And relational stuff stuff means being with other people. And Jesus sends his disciples out. He sends us out as well. And he says, wherever you go, stay in the same house until you leave town, but if any place refuses to welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off from your feet. So the disciples went out, telling everyone they met, teaching them, healing. So he sends them out, he sends us out. And here are the three things that he tells them to do. Listen, teach, and care. Right? As I look back at my 5 years in the nonprofit, entrepreneurial, humanitarian aid world and what I do with Acts of Wisdom and our stuff in Africa, I have come to view evangelism a little bit differently. Evangelism for so long has been a detriment to the church. What do I mean by that? We have caused more harm than we have done good through evangelism. Because for so long, evangelism was about conversion first. Right? I read an article about in the late 1980s, early 90s, when aid started to really begin to be the focus of Western nonprofits here in the United States to Africa. The president of World Vision in 1987 said this: we focus everything that we do to help others with evangelism first, because we can't necessarily give food and give help to people who are going to hell. And for so long, that has been the connotation of evangelism. But I believe evangelism is about more. I believe it is about the three words that I just mentioned just a few moments ago. It is about listening, it is about teaching, and it is about caring. And I believe the first thing that we have to do in order for anything else to matter, because if we don't do this thing first, nothing else will happen, is we have to listen. We have got to stop in this world judging someone first by the way that they look, by the color of their skin, by the country that they came from, by the religion that they operate in. We have got to stop judging first and start listening to other people's stories so that we know who they are, created in the image of God. We need to start listening, because whatever else that we are set out to do will mean nothing, and it will be all about what we think that they need rather than what's best for them. We can't just go out there and assume that we know what people want or what people need. We can't be like the bullhorn guy that I saw outside the Toyota Center a couple months ago when my wife and I went to a concert, who was yelling, holding up a sign saying we were going to hell because we were about to go in and listen to an artist. I wonder how many people he got to convert that night, by the way. My guess is he was batting zero. This is the most important step. We have got to get really good at this. We've got to listen to other people's stories, and we can't assume that we know what they need or what is best for them without hearing their story first. That is why everything that we do with Acts of Wisdom, we go in and we listen to the community before we make any type of plan. There's a wonderful TED Talk that I've mentioned before. If you've heard this before, I apologize, but it just fits, so I'm going to repeat it anyway. And it's a TED Talk from a man by the name of Ernesto Ceroli. He is an Italian who lives in Christchurch, New Zealand, and in 1971 through 1977, Ernesto did a whole ton of aid work in the country of Africa. It was a big time for aid. Going to Africa, the movement was happening, and he was a young boy. He was growing up in Italy, and he said, look, the Italians, I believe, we're good people. We have good intentions, and so we were going to go to Africa, and we were going to help all of these people. He said, consequently, everything that we did and everything that we touched failed. And he said, one example of how we failed is we went to Zambia. And we were going to go down to Zambia and we were going to teach the Zambian people how to farm. He said, we were going to save them from starvation. And so we get there, and there is this beautiful valley as it goes down. There's rich soil, and there's the Zambezi River that is flowing right through there. Wonderful way for irrigation, lush, fertile land. We brought our Italian seeds, and we were going to teach them how to plant. He says, nobody showed up the first day. So we had to pay them to come to teach us. For us to teach them how to farm, and 8 people showed up. And he said, we got there and we helped them plant. And he said the tomatoes that would grow like this in Italy grew like this in that rich, fertile soil. And strawberries and zucchinis and everything was growing until one night, hippos from the Zambezi River came up and they ate the entire crops. Everything. He said, we were like, oh my God, the hippos. And the Zambezi people says, yes, why do you think we have no crops? And he says, but you didn't tell us. And they said, you didn't ask. He said, so we didn't feed one starving person, but we fed all the hippos in Zambia. All because we went there and we thought what we were going to do is we were going to help them. And we knew exactly what they needed, and we didn't listen. And he said, sometimes in our work, we just need to shut up and listen. And he says too, and I agree with him, we also have to realize, this is a principle that Schumacher had in his book, Small is Beautiful. He says, when we're talking about helping other people, when we're talking about aid, and when we're talking about humanitarian efforts, we also have to know that if people do not wish to be helped, we have to leave them alone. And that can be hard for us. Right? But Jesus even gets at this principle by saying, there are going to be some people who don't want to hear, there are going to be some people who don't want your care. You need to shake the dust off and you need to go on. We've got to get really good at listening. Now, Jimmy, I'm going to warn you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to switch things up a little bit. Because I realized, y'all are going to get the edited version, I realized after hearing this at 8 o'clock, I'm going to switch caring and teaching around. So I'm going to skip to caring next, Jimmy. All right? Caring. Because here's what caring says. Remember, people won't care what you know until they know that you care. People won't care what you know until they know that you care. There's no way we can teach other people what we know until they know that we care. And it begins by listening. So now teaching. Teaching isn't just about talking. Teaching is about sharing. It's about the sharing of ideas. It is about asking questions to solicit answers. And I believe teaching just doesn't happen in the classroom. Each of us can be teachers in our lives. You can teach just by how you live your life. When I was in youth and family ministry, I always said, adults, you are the curriculum for our youth in church, because they are looking at us to see what matters. You can teach by having a cup of coffee with your best friend. You can teach by having a conversation over a beer. And in order for us to get to that stage, we must first stop and listen to show the people that we care. Because they won't care what we know until they know that we care. And then that can then enable us to begin to teach and to share what Christ has called us to. These have to be the components of evangelism. And notice nowhere in there did I say anything about bringing people to Jesus. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we make in mission work. We're going to bring Jesus to those people, and we don't realize Jesus is already there. Notice I didn't say anything about getting more people and butts in these pews either. That's not what discipleship is about either. This is our fundamental reason for existing. Discipleship. To go out and to share what Jesus taught us. This listening and caring and teaching, this isn't something that we get to vote on, whether or not we are going to do this or not. It is actually a command that is given to us by Jesus. And the command comes after Jesus' death and resurrection. This is so important. Jesus came back to tell his disciples exactly this. Go out into the world and baptize all people, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them everything that I have taught you to obey. He could have came back and they could have talked about anything. Right? That empty tomb thing. Pretty cool, huh? Nope. Didn't talk about that. He talked about this principle. And all throughout the early church, we see the disciples doing this. And here's the thing. This isn't something... Jesus doesn't want something different for the 21st century church. Jesus wants the same thing. His command then is still ours today. Now, if all of this seems daunting to you, remember, you are just one part of the process. You are not the process itself. All right, what do I mean by that? I mean there are three parts to this, and I'm not talking about listening, caring, and teaching. I'm talking about your part, their part, and God's part. All right? There's your part, the things that you can do to help a person in their spiritual journey, the listening, the caring, the teaching. But then it's their part. And that's the stuff that they are responsible for. And remember, we talked about, Jesus says the sower went out to sow some seeds and they fell on different types of soil. We talked about that parable a couple of weeks ago. There are going to be different types of people with different types of soil. Some's going to stick, some ain't. But if they're not interested in growing, there's not much you can do about it. Let's go back to that principle, right? They don't want help, you just got to leave them alone. You got to dust the sand off your sandals and go on down the road. Because there's got to be a desire and a hunger for change and for learning and for growth. And if it ain't there, there's nothing you can do about that. So don't worry about that part. Oh, do we have to worry about God's part? Nah. God's going to show up and do God's part. And remember, God is the one who's responsible for the growth of a person. God is responsible for the transformation that happens into a person. So all you got to do is worry about your part. Understand your part. Look, I believe God wants us to be in ministry together. That we can't do this by ourselves, but that we need each other. Because let's face it, I have certain gifts that you may not have. You may have certain gifts that I don't have. And so on and so on and so on. So God calls us into this ministry together. And as a church, we have to get really good at reevaluating what it means to be in evangelism ministry and mission ministry. We've got to get really good at listening so that we can show people that we care, so that we can in turn then teach and become the disciples every day that Jesus has called us to be. Amen.